Close your eyes, imagine yourself stepping into a medieval town at dusk. The evening draws near. The sun, already dipping below the horizon, leaves the medieval town bathed in a dusky gold that slowly gives way to shadow. You find yourself standing before the town gates, tall and weathered, built from stone blocks that have seen centuries of footsteps and the press of countless lives. The gates are heavy, iron-studded oak, swinging slowly as merchants, travelers, and villagers stream through. They creak with an ancient groan, as though each movement carries the weight of history. Beyond them, a narrow lane stretches inward, winding like a ribbon through the heart of the town. As you step inside, the cobblestones shift beneath your feet, uneven and worn smooth in places by countless shoes, boots, and cartwheels. Each stone has a story, perhaps of a nobleman passing on horseback, or a peasant with bare, calloused feet hurrying to market. You can almost feel those lives beneath you with every step you take. The lane is narrow, so narrow in places that two carts can barely pass each other. Timbered houses loom overhead, their upper floors jutting out precariously, almost touching across the street. Their beams are dark with age, while plastered walls are painted in faded shades of white, ochre, or earth red. Here and there, small lanterns hang from wooden posts, their flames flickering and sputtering in the wind. Shadows dance across the walls, making the building seem alive, like silent witnesses to the bustle below. As you walk further in, the sounds of the marketplace reach you like a tide. The murmur of voices at first, then louder, a growing chorus of shouts, greetings, laughter, and bartering cries. A crier's voice rises above the din, proclaiming the arrival of fresh fish from the river, while another announces news of a noble wedding soon to be celebrated. The sounds echo between the narrow houses, creating a living music that pulls you deeper into the square. The smell hits you next, thick, layered, complex. Smoke from hearths drifts down the lanes, mingling with the scent of roasting meat from open stalls. You catch the sharpness of onions frying, the sweetness of honey cakes baking, and the salt of freshly cured fish. Yet not all is pleasant. There's also the sour tang of ale sloshed onto cobblestones, the musk of animals, the faint but ever-present staleness of sewage trickling through open drains at the sides of the street. It is the smell of life in all its rawness, pressing in from every side. A bell tolls in the distance, the church bell, sonorous and commanding. Its voice rolls across the rooftops, announcing the hour, marking time for rich and poor alike. The sound deepens the twilight atmosphere, reminding every ear that night is approaching and that business in the market must soon reach its height before the darkness settles in. Children weave through the crowd, darting between carts and animals. Their laughter is quick and bright, even as mothers scold and tug them closer. Chickens scuttle across the cobblestones, wings flapping in protest as they are carried to stalls. A donkey brays, stubbornly refusing to move, while a cart driver shouts and tugs at the reins. Dogs sniff the ground, hopeful for scraps, their tails wagging beneath the flicker of torchlight. You feel the press of humanity as you approach the market square proper. Shoulders brush past you, the rustle of woolen cloaks and coarse linen tunics fills the air. The crowd surges forward in waves, everyone moving toward the center of commerce, where stalls have been set up since the morning. The square itself opens suddenly from the narrow lane, like a hidden clearing revealed at last. It is broad, cobbled, and ringed with buildings of stone and timber, guild halls, merchant houses, and the tall spire of the parish church. The church bell still hums faintly in your ears, but here it mingles with the cries of sellers calling out their wares. Torches are being lit one by one as daylight fades. Their glow casts halos of orange light against the dusk, illuminating faces and goods alike. In one corner, a spice merchant shakes his pouch of cinnamon and cloves, the fragrance cutting sharply through the smoke. Beside him, a butcher lays out slabs of meat, his knife flashing in the firelight as he slices, the blade ringing faintly on his chopping block. The crowd shifts like a living sea, voices rising and falling in rhythm with the marketplace itself. Bargains are struck with laughter or with heated argument, the clink of coins punctuating the flow. Somewhere, a lute begins to play, its melody soft and lilting, rising above the murmur of trade. The textures of the square are vivid underfoot and all around. Cobblestones, slick with spilled ale, crunch faintly where straw has been thrown to soak up mess. The beams of the timbered houses, polished by time, glow under torchlight. Rough-woven tents flap in the evening breeze, each sheltering goods, bolts of cloth, baskets of apples, pots of honey, or barrels of salt. The flicker of torchlight reveals the gleam of pewter cups, the shimmer of dyed fabrics, and the dull glow of leather shoes newly stitched. And through it all, smoke drifts constantly. Thin wisps rise from torches, from fire pits roasting meat, from homes just beyond the square where evening meals are being prepared. The smoke carries with it a haze, softening the edges of vision, making every flame flicker with a halo. It is a place alive and yet ancient, a square that has seen centuries of nights just like this one. Merchants calling, families gathering, children running, thieves lurking, guards patrolling. As the night deepens, the market is both comfort and chaos, a sanctuary of goods and light within the dark embrace of the medieval town. And you, standing here, are part of it now. The cobblestones beneath your feet, the torches above your head, the cries of the vendors swirling around you, the bells fading into night. This is the heart of medieval life, and tonight you enter it, step by step, sense by sense, until the market square is no longer a distant history but a living moment breathing all around you. The market is alive not only in sight and smell but most of all in sound. Close your eyes, and the square becomes a symphony, woven together by 100 different threads of noise, sometimes clashing, sometimes blending, always shifting like the tide. At first it is the merchants you hear. Their voices are the backbone of the marketplace, rising above all others with practiced force. A fishmonger calls out, his tone booming and insistent, fresh from the river. Silver scales, still glistening, caught just this morning. Not far away, a cloth seller sings his wares in a lilting rhythm, almost like a chant. Fine wool, fine linen, colors of the East, cloth to keep you warm through winter's bite. Their calls overlap, sometimes harmonizing, sometimes jarring against one another, but always persistent. An endless invitation, a chorus demanding to be heard. Threaded through this are the voices of buyers. Some soft and hesitant, asking for a price, others sharp with impatience, bargaining fiercely. The haggling is a sound of its own, a kind of verbal duel. A woman's voice rises in complaint, too much, far too much. I'll not pay a penny more. The merchant answers with equal passion, swearing that he'll go hungry if he lowers his price. Back and forth they go, the rhythm of their dispute attracting an audience, until at last laughter breaks out, and the deal is struck with the clink of coins into a waiting hand. Elsewhere, laughter bubbles freely, unrestrained. A group of children chase one another between the stalls, their giggles cutting brightly through the heavier tones of adult conversation. They squeal as a dog joins their game, barking merrily, its nails clicking against the cobblestones. The sound is light, fleeting, like sunlight breaking through clouds. But not all is laughter. Sometimes the noise grows sharp, edged with tension. A man shouts as a goat slips from its tether and crashes into a fruit stand, sending apples rolling across the ground. The stall keeper curses, the goat bleats in panic, and for a moment chaos erupts, shouting, chasing, scolding, all rising together into a tangle of harsh sound. And then, as quickly as it began, the noise settles, the goat is caught, the apples gathered, and the market's rhythm restores itself as if nothing had happened at all. Above this earthly music, the faint strains of minstrels drift. A lute plucked gently, a pipe whistling a playful tune, a drum keeping steady beat. Their songs float across the square, sometimes swallowed by the crowd, sometimes piercing through with clarity, like a bird's call in the forest. People pause to listen, some clapping along, others tossing a coin into the minstrel's cap. The melody lingers, weaving through the marketplace like a silver thread, binding together the many sounds into something almost like harmony. Yet not every sound is joyous. Listen more closely, and you hear the groan of wooden cart wheels, the creak of leather harnesses strained under weight. Horses snort, hooves striking stone with hollow rhythm. Blacksmiths at the edge of the square hammer metal into shape, each strike ringing loud and clear, echoing against stone walls like a bell. Pots clang as they are set down, knives scrape against whetstones, wooden lids slam shut on barrels. It is the noise of work, hard and unrelenting, grounding the market in labor. And then, amid all this life, comes silence. Not long, never lasting, but noticeable. Perhaps it is when the church bell tolls again, deep and solemn, and for a heartbeat the market stills to listen. Voices hush, heads turn, the bell's voice filling every space with its command. Or perhaps it is when a sudden gust of wind sweeps through, rattling stall cloths and carrying smoke across the square, muting human voices for a breath. These silences are brief, but they sharpen the noise that follows, making every shout, every laugh, every clatter seem brighter when it returns. The gossip flows steadily too, quieter than merchants' cries but just as constant. Two women whisper by a bread stall, their voices quick and conspiratorial, speaking of a neighbor's daughter and her secret courtship. Nearby, a group of men share news of distant lands, rumors of war, of trade ships arriving, of taxes soon to be raised. Their words ripple with importance, though no one beyond their circle can truly know if the tales are truth or mere invention. Gossip is its own kind of sound, half hidden, but vital to the market's life. Somewhere a fight breaks out, small, fleeting, nothing rare. A thief caught slipping a hand into a purse, perhaps, or a dispute over coin. Voices rise, harsh and angry, a scuffle of feet on cobblestones, the sharp bark of a town guard cutting through the din. For a moment, all nearby ears tilt toward the ruckus. But then as the quarrel dies down, attention drifts back to trade, to laughter, to the music that never quite ceases. And always, underneath, the market hums. It is not any single voice or sound, but the blend of all, low conversation, distant shouts, the hum of hundreds of people together. Like the sea against the shore, it rises and falls, restless, eternal. The night deepens and with it the market sounds change. Merchants grow louder as they try to sell the last of their goods before darkness. Their calls grow more insistent, last loaves, fresh loaves, buy before they're gone. The music of minstrels grows bolder, encouraged by the swelling crowd. The laughter of those drinking ale near the tavern grows freer, looser, spilling into the street in boisterous waves. And yet here and there quiet lingers. A side alley where two lovers whisper. A mother singing softly to her child. The faint shuffle of a beggar moving through the edges of the square, his voice low, asking for alms. These small pockets of calm stand out all the more because of the market's noise, like stars against a darkened sky. In this tapestry of sound, every note has its place. The cry of merchants, the laughter of children, the bark of dogs, the clatter of tools, the song of minstrels, the toll of the bell. Together they form the voice of the market, living and unceasing, as alive as the crowd that fills it. And as you listen, standing in the middle of the square, you realize that this is not chaos. It is a kind of music raw and unpolished but real. It is the sound of medieval life itself, echoing across time, carrying you deeper into the night. The market is alive not only with sound but with scent. Close your eyes and imagine stepping into the town square, your senses drawn immediately to the aromas that swirl around you. In a medieval town, smell is as much a guide as sight or sound. It is the first thing to reach you even before you see the stalls or hear the merchants' calls. From the corner of the square comes the smell of roasting meats. Thick, savory smoke curls into the air, mingling with the scent of sizzling fat and herbs. Chickens turn slowly over open flames, their skin crisping to a deep golden brown. Pigs roast on spits, their aroma rich, heavy, a perfume that makes mouths water and stomachs growl. Occasionally, A huff of wind carries the scent toward a particular alley, teasing passers-by as they follow it, pulled along by hunger as much as curiosity. Nearby, the fishmongers claim their own corner of the olfactory landscape. Freshly caught herring, mackerel, and cod lie on beds of crushed ice or straw, their briny smell sharp and unmistakable. Salted cod hangs in small bundles, its aroma both pungent and sweetly briny, mingling with the smell of wet nets and seaweed. If the wind shifts just so, the scent drifts toward a baker's stall, and you smell salt, sea, and sweetness layered together in the cool evening air. The sweetness of baked goods offers relief from the savory meats and the briny fish. Honey cakes, sticky and fragrant, sit on wooden trays, their aroma golden and warm. Breads fresh from the oven give off a comforting yeasty smell that carries across the square. Perhaps someone has spiced their pies with cinnamon, cloves, or nutmeg, subtle but strong enough to be noticed in passing. These scents draw families together, guiding hands toward coins and plates, encouraging small indulgences. And then there are the herbal stalls. Bundles of thyme, rosemary, sage, and lavender hang from beams and hooks, their pungent but pleasing scent rising as the wind brushes through. Mint, parsley, and marjoram are tucked into baskets, some loose, some tied into small posies. The aromas are earthy and vibrant, reminding those who pass that these plants have powers beyond taste, curative powers, charms, prayers, protection. They are the smell of life, of healing, of hope amidst the market's frenzy. Yet alongside these pleasant scents exist the less agreeable, unavoidable aromas that shape the memory of medieval towns. The tannery is one such place, a corner of pungent, heavy odors. The process of preparing hides for leather produces a mix of chemical smells, lime, urine, and the faint but strong tang of rawhide. Passers-by hurry past these stalls, wrinkling their noses, yet even the unpleasant smells become part of the square's identity. They remind the townspeople of work, of craft, of things made with hands and patience. Refuse piles also contribute to the olfactory canvas. Middens at the edges of the square carry the scent of discarded food, broken pottery, and vegetable peelings. The smell is sharp, sour, a reminder that even in abundance, waste exists. Occasionally, a sudden gust lifts the scent toward the main thoroughfare, and people step aside, coughing slightly, but soon the market's more fragrant smells reclaim dominance. Smoke, too, drifts in waves through the narrow streets. Torches flicker, chimneys puff small streams of gray into the evening air, and fires from cooking areas waft upward. Sometimes the smoke carries a tinge of wood smoke, dry and warm, reminding passers-by of hearths and homes nearby. Other times the smoke is thicker, carrying the acrid smell of burning coal or resin. These scents are part of the environment, shaping the very air the townspeople breathe, embedding themselves into the memory of place. The interplay between pleasant and unpleasant odors is subtle, yet profound. A young child walking beside their mother may wrinkle their nose at the stink of refuse, then inhale the sweetness of honey cakes, their tiny senses dancing between the extremes. Adults, seasoned by years of life in the town, breathe in the mixture as if it were a single complex perfume. The tang of the sea, the warmth of bread, the sharp bite of smoke, the earthy aroma of herbs, the richness of roasted meats, the harsh tang of tannery hides. It is a scentscape that tells a story, each note marking time, labor, pleasure, and danger. Certain smells carry stories of their own. The scent of fish might remind a sailor of the harbor at dawn, nets dripping with the night's catch. The sweetness of honey could evoke a wedding feast, the laughter of friends and family, or the careful preparation of a special meal. Smoke rising from the bakery or the forge might signal the end of a workday, the coming of dusk, the promise of warmth in a cold stone home. Even the less pleasant smells, tannery, refuse, smoke, anchor the memory of place, embedding the square in the minds of all who pass through it. And then there are fleeting scents, those that arrive only momentarily. The soft perfume of a bouquet carried by a young woman, tucked beneath her arm. The subtle aroma of a horse's sweat as it passes by. The faint smell of freshly dug earth from a nearby garden or recently tilled field. These ephemeral smells layer themselves atop the stronger odors, creating depth, texture, and nuance, just as notes of color layer a painter's canvas. As the market moves from day toward evening, the smells begin to shift. The heat of the sun fades, allowing the smoke and aromas of cooking to become sharper, more immediate. Roasts that have been cooking all afternoon release their full fragrance, drawing buyers to the stalls. Herbs are crushed by hands busy with selection, releasing volatile scents that mingle with the faint tang of evening dew. Bread straight from the oven fills the air with warmth and sweetness, while the tannery and refuse continue their quiet insistence, reminders that life in the town is never purely pleasant, never purely sweet. Even as people leave, the scents linger. They settle into corners, cling to doorways, drift along the streets long after the square empties. A visitor leaving the town might still smell the market on their clothes, their hair, their skin. The memory of the town is thus preserved in scent, as vivid and persistent as any sight or sound. The olfactory landscape of a medieval market is rich, layered, complex. It is a world where pleasure and discomfort coexist, where every stall, every corner, every fire contributes to the tapestry. It is a place where the smells shape the experience of place, where the aromas of food, herbs, labor, and waste mix to tell the story of a town, of its people, of their lives. And as night falls, as torches flicker and merchants pack away their goods, the scents linger, like a ghost of life in the town. They fade slowly, leaving behind memory, leaving behind the shape of a world that was never simple, never silent, never static. In the Middle Ages, the smell of the market was the smell of life itself. Sweet, bitter, rich, harsh, fleeting, persistent. A story told to the nose, to the mind, and to memory. As you step deeper into the medieval market, the heart of the square comes alive. Here, among the bustling crowd and the flickering torchlight, are the merchants, each with their own corner, their own voice, their own story. The market is not only a place of trade but a tapestry of life, of color, of smell, of touch. A place where goods and people merge in a symphony of commerce, ritual, and human connection. The textile sellers are often the first to catch your eye. Their stalls are vibrant with bolts of cloth, draped over wooden racks, fluttering gently in the evening breeze. Woolens in shades of deep brown, warm ochre, and muted gray invite a careful touch. Smooth linens, soft and almost luminous in the torchlight, promise cool comfort against the skin. Rich velvets, their pile thick and luxurious, shine in hues of ruby and emerald, reflecting the firelight in tiny glimmers. Some fabrics are simple, meant for tunics and everyday wear, while others are elaborate, destined for the homes of wealthier patrons or for ceremonial use. The texture alone tells a story. Coarse wool for hardy farmers, finely spun linen for merchants' daughters, silk imported from far-off lands, delicate and almost translucent, whispering of distant ports and exotic lands. Next to the textiles, ironmongers display their wares with pride. Their tables clink with the sound of metal as hammers tap gently, testing the strength and quality of the pieces. Knives, axes, and chisels gleam under the torchlight, their edges sharp, their handles worn smooth from repeated use. Small tools for carpentry and household tasks sit alongside larger items meant for defense or labor. Iron pots, frying pans, and cauldrons with heavy, looping handles. Some ironmongers offer locks and keys, small but vital tokens of security in a bustling town. Each item has weight, cold and reassuring in the hand, the texture rough or polished, telling a story of skill, labor, and necessity. The baker's stalls are a feast for the senses. Loaves of bread, round and crusted, are stacked in baskets, their crust golden and warm to the touch. Sweet rolls dusted with sugar or cinnamon sit beside honey cakes glistening in the flickering light. The scent of fresh bread mingles with the smoke of nearby fires, drawing the hungry and the curious alike. Bakers call out their wares, offering small samples, and there is a rhythm to the scene. The clinking of coins, the laughter of children trying to grab a treat, the quiet, grateful smiles of those who purchase the day's bread. The texture is varied, the crust firm and crunchy, the crumbs soft and yielding, the honey sticky and sweet. Every bite, every smell, is an invitation into the life of the market. Nearby, the apothecaries sit with rows of jars and bundles of herbs. Their stalls are fragrant with lavender, rosemary, sage, and other dried plants. The shelves are crowded with powders, oils, and tinctures, all meant to heal or protect, or sometimes to charm and enchant. Small bottles of colored liquids catch the light, ruby red, deep green, golden amber, hinting at their potent contents. Apothecaries often mix, grind, and measure, sometimes offering remedies for the day's ailments. A tincture for a cough, a salve for a burn, a potion to calm the nerves. Their hands are skilled, their eyes precise, their voices soft as they instruct patrons on the use of each item. The texture of herbs is rough or soft, brittle or fragrant, reminding everyone that life in the medieval town was delicate, precarious, and reliant on knowledge passed down through generations. And then there are the traders with exotic goods, the ones who bring tales and objects from faraway lands. Silks, as light as air and shimmering with every hue of sunset, hang from simple beams. Spices, fragrant and mysterious, are displayed in small sacks or boxes. Cinnamon, clove, saffron, and pepper, each carrying with it the heat and aroma of distant shores. Dyes, deep blues from indigo, reds from cochineal, yellows from saffron or weld, add a painterly quality to the stalls, the colors almost too vivid to believe. Every item is a story, a connection to distant lands and cultures. Merchants boast of their journeys, weaving tales of caravans crossing deserts, ships braving storms, and markets in Venice or Constantinople filled with wonders unimaginable to most townsfolk. The scents, textures, and colors of these exotic goods are intoxicating, transporting anyone who lingers into the imagination of a larger world. The everyday wares, meanwhile, form the foundation of life in the square. Pots and pans, sturdy and functional, line the tables of small tradesmen. Wool for knitting or weaving, bundled in rough skeins, offers warmth during cold winters. Baskets of vegetables, earthy and fresh, provide the staple foods of the town. Cabbages, onions, carrots, and root vegetables, their colors muted but vibrant, each one carrying the taste of the soil and the effort of the hands that grew them. Even simple items, a wooden spoon, a clay jug, a leather belt, have texture, weight, and story. They are used and worn, marked by the lives of those who handle them, and they whisper of the rhythms of everyday existence. Amidst all these goods, the conversations of the market weave a tapestry as rich as the objects themselves. The voices rise and fall, a merchant calling out the quality of his wares, a mother haggling over the price of vegetables, a young apprentice asking questions about silks or spices. Children run past, their laughter ringing out, occasionally bumped into by a passing dog or horse. Tradesmen argue good-naturedly over the freshness of produce or the durability of pots. Minstrels play, their music weaving through the chatter, adding rhythm and life. Each conversation, each tone, each inflection becomes part of the market's texture, layering over the colors, the textures, the smells, creating a rich, multisensory experience. Notice the tactile nature of the goods. Silk slides through fingers, almost unreal in its softness. Wool is rough, warm, fibrous. Iron is cold, heavy, reassuring. Bread yields to the touch, crumbling in small, fragrant pieces. Herbs are brittle, fragrant, and earthy. Spices slip between fingers as fine powders, leaving a residue of aroma. Every item has a texture that tells its story, its origin, its use, its life in the hands of the buyer and the seller. Even the act of trade is ritualized. Coins clink as they pass hands, sometimes counted carefully, sometimes handed with a shrug. Merchants call out assurances, fresh today, strong and true, good for your hearth. The rhythm of negotiation is musical in its own way, punctuated by laughter, surprise, and agreement. The crowd flows around the stalls, like water navigating stones, people bumping gently into each other, animals weaving between legs, baskets brushing against coats. And the colors? The market is a painter's palette, reds and yellows of fruits, the deep browns and ochres of woolens, the gleaming metal of tools, the golden crust of bread, the green of fresh herbs. Even the firelight adds a flickering brush stroke, warm glow against the muted stone of the streets. Everything is vibrant, alive with history. As night approaches, merchants begin to pack up, the once vibrant stalls taking on a quieter, subdued air. Some call out last-minute bargains, others wrap their goods carefully, preparing for the journey home. The smells of cooking drift into the evening, mingling with the fading heat of the day. The textures of the market, the rough wool, the smooth silks, the cold iron, linger in memory. The colors, rich and deep, fade slowly into dusk, but the stories embedded in each object, each transaction, each voice remain, waiting to be recalled by anyone who walked the market square. The merchants and their goods were more than commerce. They were the pulse of the town, the stories in fabric and iron, in bread and herbs, in silks and spices. They shaped memory, influenced daily life, and connected the medieval town to a wider, more complex world. To walk the market was to be part of that pulse, to touch the textures, breathe in the scents, hear the voices, and feel the living story of medieval streets. Here every object was alive. Every conversation mattered. Every texture, color, scent, and sound became part of a living tapestry of human experience. And in the quiet moments when the stalls emptied and torches flickered low, the memory of the merchants, their goods, and the vibrant market life lingered, as vivid and textured as the fabrics themselves. The medieval market was not only a feast for the senses but also a theater of negotiation, a stage where human interaction danced as intricately as the goods displayed. Each purchase, each exchange was a ritual, a negotiation of value, trust, and sometimes wit. To step into the marketplace was to step into this ritual, where the clink of coins, the creak of scales, and the measured words of merchants and buyers wove a story as alive as any of the goods themselves. The first lesson of the market was that nothing came without discussion. Prices were rarely fixed. A merchant would present a bolt of cloth, a loaf of bread, a bundle of herbs, and the buyer would respond not with agreement but with curiosity, scrutiny, and sometimes outright challenge. The price displayed might be merely a suggestion, a beginning point, a starting note in a melody of haggling. Merchants knew the rhythm of their audience, gauging patience and boldness, weighing each word as carefully as the scales they used. Coins jingled in leather purses, each one a testament to labor, time, and fortune. Shillings and pennies, silver and copper, were counted meticulously, often in the open air to assure honesty. Scales hung from wooden beams or balanced on simple benches, their brass pans gleaming in the afternoon light. Weights, precise and standardized, were placed upon one pan while the coins or goods sat on the other. The careful clink and shift of metal created a soundscape all its own, rhythmic, reassuring, and exacting, a cadence that underscored the human drama of commerce. But merchants were rarely without cunning. Tricks, small and subtle, abounded. A slightly heavier cloth folded cleverly could make the piece seem more generous. Coins could be palmed, substituted, or questioned. A loaf of bread might be presented as larger than it was, the crust carefully rounded to appear fuller. Buyers equally wary would inspect, tap, and test, pressing a finger into the dough, lifting the cloth to feel its weight and texture. A glance, a smile, a measured word, these were the weapons of the trade, the tools of negotiation, and the essence of trust and distrust in the marketplace. The ritual of bargaining often began with observation. A buyer would walk slowly along the stalls, fingers brushing lightly against fabrics, eyes scanning fruits and vegetables, ears attuned to the calls of merchants. Merchants, in turn, watched carefully, noting those who lingered, those who touched lightly, those who nodded appreciatively, and those who appeared hurried. This silent dance of appraisal set the stage. A merchant might call out, "Fresh today, finest bread, sweet as honey," and the buyer might respond with polite interest, letting curiosity show without giving desire too freely. Then came the approach. The buyer might say softly, "How much for this cloth?" The merchant's voice, firm but welcoming, would respond, "10 pence for a good piece, soft as the summer's breeze." Here the ritual begins, the opening offer. The buyer might examine the fabric further, comment on its weave, its color, its softness, and then say, "8 pence seems fair, considering the season's wear." A pause ensues. Perhaps the merchant shakes their head, fingers tapping the wood. "9 pence, not one less. Fine cloth such as this is rare." The dance continues, each side testing patience, weighing value against desire. Coins might be brought forward, laid carefully on the counter, counted one by one. Sometimes a buyer would pretend to reach for their purse, drawing the merchant's attention away, only to return with a calculated proposal. Words, gestures, glances, each has meaning. The haggling itself is as much about psychology as math, showing calm, showing confidence, pretending uncertainty, appearing generous or frugal. The transaction is a game, and both sides are players aware of the stakes: money, reputation, and satisfaction. For bread, the ritual could be simpler, yet just as rich in detail. Imagine a round, golden loaf, its crust warm and crackling. A mother approaches, her children tugging at her skirts. She asked for a price. The baker, knowing the weight of flour and the effort of fire, quotes 2 pence. She examines the loaf, tapping gently to hear its firmness. She might say, 1.5? The baker, feigning reluctance, might shake his head, 2 for the crust and crumb, sweet lady. She smiles faintly, counting coins in her palm, and finally they agree on 1.75. A compromise, a small victory for both, marked by smiles and polite thanks. The loaf is handed over, the coins counted, and the ritual completed with a sense of satisfaction that both have won something. For more exotic goods, like imported cloth or rare spices, the process could stretch into minutes, sometimes hours. Buyers might compare colors, test textures, sniff spices, ask about origins. From the ports of Venice, a buyer might ask, lifting a bag of saffron. "Yes, finest threads, imported just last month," the merchant replies, eyes gleaming. Then the dance begins, a series of offers, counter-offers, questions, and assessments. "I can offer half the weight in coins," says the buyer. "Too low," replies the merchant. "3/4 and the bag is yours." And so it continues, a careful rhythm that is at once business and social performance, a ritual that reinforces the bonds and boundaries of the marketplace. The interplay of trust and distrust is central. Merchants and buyers alike must judge honesty, value, and fairness, often without written contracts. A glance at the hands, the posture, the tone of voice, can reveal intentions. A smile might indicate goodwill or conceal cunning. The experience teaches patience, perception, and respect for human complexity. The marketplace is a school for the senses and for the mind, where every negotiation is both commerce and education, shaping the understanding of society and human behavior. Even in failure, the ritual has meaning. A buyer may leave a stall empty-handed, nodding politely, maintaining dignity. The merchant may call after them, "Come again. Fresh tomorrow." And tomorrow the cycle will repeat. This repetition, this rhythm, creates a structure to the day, a continuity that connects people, objects, and communities. The ritual of buying and bargaining is not merely transaction. It is the heartbeat of medieval life, a pulse felt in the hands, the eyes, the coins, and the words exchanged. And so, in this market, every negotiation becomes a story. Every transaction, from a loaf of bread to a rare bolt of silk, carries with it human drama. Trust, cunning, patience, generosity, and sometimes frustration. The scales, the coins, the folds of fabric, the crust of bread, all are characters in this ongoing tale. To watch, to participate, to listen and observe is to understand the medieval marketplace, not just as a place of commerce, but as a living network of relationships, culture, and human ingenuity. The rituals of haggling are precise yet flexible, grounded in shared understanding yet open to creativity. The buyer learns to be discerning, the merchant to be persuasive. The goods themselves, rough wool, delicate silks, iron tools, fragrant spices, golden loaves, carry weight, color, and texture that influence the dance of negotiation. And in every deal struck, in every smile exchanged, the market lives, breathing the rhythms of medieval life into every visitor and merchant alike. By the end of the day, when the coins are counted, the goods packed away, and the market begins to empty, the echoes of haggling linger. The lessons, the textures, the stories, and the rhythms remain, imprinting themselves in memory like the delicate impression of a seal in soft wax. And as night falls over the square, torches flickering low and the last cries of merchants fading, the market sleeps, resting until morning when the ritual begins anew, coins clinking, voices rising, and the eternal dance of buying and bargaining once again unfolding beneath the medieval sky. The medieval market was never merely a collection of goods, it was a living tapestry of humanity, woven with the threads of countless lives, each with its own textures, colors, and rhythms. To walk its cobblestones was to witness the full spectrum of society, from the lowliest peasant to the most privileged noble, from wandering pilgrims to wandering minstrels, from bawling infants to the bent figures of beggars. Every step, every glance revealed a story, a presence, a voice that contributed to the heartbeat of the market. The first figures you might notice are the peasants. Their clothes were plain, homespun wool or rough linen, often patched and frayed from months of labor. Faces were sun-darkened, hands calloused, eyes alert to both bargains and dangers. They moved with purpose, clutching baskets of eggs, bundles of herbs, or sacks of grain. They were here not for spectacle but for survival, exchanging the fruits of their toil for the goods they could not produce themselves. Their voices carried the rhythm of work and life, sharp with laughter or tinged with fatigue. They called greetings to familiar merchants, argued lightly over prices, and whispered to one another about news from distant fields. Each gesture, each step, was rooted in practical necessity yet carried subtle signs of personality, pride, and community. Among the peasants, children darted like sparks across the market lanes. They were everywhere, tugging at their mothers' skirts, chasing one another between the stalls, occasionally reaching for a shiny coin or a dangling fruit. Their laughter, sometimes shrill, sometimes muffled by the press of bodies, punctuated the more serious murmurings of adults. Children were at once a delight and a concern, lively, curious, and unafraid of danger. Merchants would occasionally smile at them, tossing a small scrap of bread or fruit as a token, while mothers kept a vigilant hand on the nearest arm. Watching them was like seeing life itself in miniature. Energy, resilience, and a spark of mischief woven into the routine of labor and trade. Pilgrims were another constant presence. Their clothes bore the marks of long journeys, dust-stained robes, worn leather shoes, simple staffs, and small pouches carrying what little they needed. Some bore symbols of distant holy sites, shells from Santiago de Compostela, or embroidered crosses on their garments. They walked with a certain rhythm, often slower than the bustling crowd, heads bowed in contemplation or lifted in awe at the sights around them. Their voices were quiet, melodic with the accents of distant lands, occasionally greeting one another with blessings or reciting short prayers under breath. To encounter a pilgrim was to touch a world beyond the town itself, to sense the wider currents of faith and travel that shaped medieval life. Friars and monks moved among the market with a different air. Their robes, sometimes plain brown, sometimes black, were distinctive and immediately recognizable. They carried no goods, or perhaps only a small satchel, for their wealth was not material but spiritual. They greeted some with warmth, others with solemnity, and were often welcomed by merchants eager to receive blessings for a good day's trade. Friars might stop to preach briefly, hands raised, drawing attention even for a few moments, or distribute small alms to children or beggars. Their presence was a constant reminder that the market, while earthly in purpose, was not divorced from the sacred rhythms of medieval life. Beggars, in contrast, wove a more shadowed presence. Ragged, gaunt, their eyes bright with need, they moved silently or shuffled through the crowd with tentative confidence. Hands outstretched, they offered whispered pleas, sometimes joined by small children who clung to them or scampered ahead to attract attention. Beggars were a delicate part of the market's social fabric. Tolerated, sometimes scorned, occasionally aided. Coins or scraps tossed in their direction were rare, precious gifts that could sustain them for a day. Observing them, one could sense the precarious balance of survival, the human instinct to hope even in the face of relentless hardship. Then there were the nobles and wealthier townsfolk, moving through the crowd with a different energy. Their robes were rich, dyed in deep blues, reds, and greens, embroidered with threads of gold or silver. Jewelry glinted in torchlight or fading sun. They were accompanied by attendants who carried small bags or parcels, or held the hands of children whose laughter rang clear above the market noise. Nobles moved with authority and poise, sometimes stopping to inspect goods, sometimes merely observing the lively bustle of those below their station. Their voices were measured, courteous, often commanding attention without force, and their presence altered the rhythm of the market lanes, parting the crowd subtly as they passed. Street entertainers provided another layer of life and spectacle. Minstrels strummed lutes or played small flutes, their songs blending with the calls of merchants and the chatter of buyers. Jugglers tossed pins and balls in precise arcs, drawing applause or laughter. Storytellers recited brief epics or moral tales, pulling children close to hear every word. These performers moved fluidly, shifting attention and energy, reminding all who watched that the market was not merely a place of necessity, but also a stage for art, humor, and fleeting wonder. Their presence added texture, a spark of color and sound that kept the senses alert even as exhaustion or routine settled in. Every encounter carried a story, a history, a hint of life beyond the immediate. A peasant might recall the harvest ruined by early frost, a pilgrim might speak of storms faced on distant roads, a merchant might describe a stolen coin from last week, and a beggar might whisper a plea that resonates with survival's urgency. These voices interwove, overlapping and colliding, creating a tapestry of human experience that was as vivid as any display of goods. Each person, each movement, each spoken word became a thread in the living fabric of the market. Dogs and other animals moved among the people as well. Hounds followed their masters, sometimes sniffing at baskets or chasing children playfully. Cats slinked among crates of vegetables or barrels of fish, hunting vermin or merely observing. Horses pulled carts, sometimes laden with sacks of grain or barrels of ale, their hooves clattering over cobblestones, adding another rhythm to the market's complex symphony. Their presence reminded all that the market was a place of work, of movement, and of life in its most raw and practical sense. Conversations layered over one another, forming a continuous hum that was sometimes jarring, sometimes soothing. Gossip flowed freely, news of distant towns, rumors of famine or fairs, reports of noble marriages, or disputes between families. Some spoke softly, others shouted with exuberance. The variety of voices, high, low, hoarse, melodic, added depth and texture to the market soundscape. Even silence had its place. Moments when a stall emptied briefly, when the wind carried only the scent of fresh bread or the smoke of roasting meat, offered brief reprieves, letting one absorb the human mosaic in a single reflective heartbeat. Even the smallest gestures carried meaning. A nod between acquaintances, a wink between a merchant and a buyer, a polite smile exchanged with a street performer, all were subtle negotiations of social interaction, signals of trust, recognition, or shared understanding. Children mimicked adults, learning patterns of courtesy and negotiation. Observing these interactions revealed the unspoken rules of medieval life, the rhythms of respect, hierarchy, and human connection that govern not only the marketplace but the wider town itself. As dusk approached, the market changed its character. Merchants began packing their goods, children grew tired and clung to parents, pilgrims sought lodging for the night, beggars found corners to settle, and entertainers gathered their instruments for the last performance of the day. The bustle slowed, but the richness of human experience remained palpable. Stories shared, coins exchanged, goods bartered, lessons taught and learned. The market left its imprint on everyone who had passed through. By nightfall, the people dispersed, each returning to their homes, inns, or monasteries. Yet the memory of their presence lingered. The peasants' weary pride, the children's energy, the pilgrims' devotion, the friar's solemnity, the noble's grace, the beggar's need, and the entertainer's artistry, all were etched into the square itself, into the cobblestones and the air. The market was more than a place. It was a reflection of medieval life, a mirror of human stories, and a living record of community, diversity, and the rich complexity of everyday existence. In this crowded, colorful, and noisy square, one could truly understand the heartbeat of medieval towns. The market was where life converged, work, play, devotion, survival, and pleasure all intertwined. The people were its soul. Without them, the stalls would be silent, the cobblestones cold, the stories untold. And as the sun set and the last lanterns flickered, one could feel the presence of those who had just passed through, carrying their experiences into the night, leaving behind echoes that would greet the dawn of the next market day. The medieval market, alive with voices, movement, and color, was never merely a place of trade and social gathering. Behind the laughter of children, the calls of merchants, and the melodic strumming of minstrels, there lurked dangers that made every visit to the square a small exercise in vigilance and adaptability. To walk its cobblestones was to navigate not only the goods of commerce but the unpredictability of human behavior, natural elements, and disease. Each market day from dawn to dusk was a dance with risk, requiring attention, caution, and sometimes luck. Perhaps the most immediate and pervasive threat came from the human element: pickpockets and petty thieves. In the bustling lanes, where elbows jostled and bodies pressed close, hands moved with quiet precision. A coin purse might vanish before the owner noticed, a small bundle of cloth or a piece of jewelry silently removed. Experienced merchants often whispered warnings to newcomers: keep your coin close, watch the backs of children, they see everything, or do not let strangers brush past your stall. Mothers clutched children tighter, peasants held baskets firmly against their chests, and nobles kept attendants close at hand. Even the most careful could fall victim. Yet the market's rhythm depended on this constant negotiation between trust and vigilance. Brawls were another inevitable feature of crowded squares. Alcohol, disagreements over price, or the simple friction of bodies pressed together could spark sudden violence. A quarrel over a stall space might erupt into shouting, pushing, and even swinging fists. Sometimes a street entertainer or a merchant would be caught in the crossfire, retreating to safer corners as voices rose and the clash of temper flared. Town guards, often stationed at strategic corners, were the arbiters of peace. Clad in mail or simple tunics with badges of authority, they moved with deliberate steps, halting disputes with a raised hand or a shouted command. Their presence was calming to some, intimidating to others, and a reminder that even in the most lively squares, order had to be enforced. Fires too posed a constant threat. Wooden stalls, thatched roofs, and open flames for cooking or lighting created a combustible environment. A dropped torch, an overturned cauldron of boiling fat, or a candle left too close to straw could set a stall alight within moments. The smoke would rise quickly, black and acrid, triggering panic and the rush of people to safer ground. Merchants would shout warnings, buckets of water or sand would be passed hastily, and neighbors aided one another in smothering the flames before they spread. Fire was a reminder of both human error and natural vulnerability, a force that could erase a day's work, or an entire street, in minutes. The market was also a hotbed for disease. Packed closely together, bodies exchanged more than coins and greetings. Sneezing, coughing, or the simple brushing of hands against shared goods facilitated the spread of illness. Vendors selling meat or fish needed to manage spoilage carefully, Yet decay was a natural hazard in warm months. Infants and the elderly were particularly vulnerable, and families moved with caution, avoiding the visibly ill or the areas where filth accumulated. Yet hygiene standards were rudimentary and waste, both human and animal, was often left in the streets, adding to the risk. Plagues and fevers were distant, yet persistent threats, woven invisibly into the daily life of the market. Animals, while often helpful or ornamental, could also contribute to disorder. Horses pulling carts might spook unexpectedly, knocking over barrels, baskets, or children. Dogs, chasing rats or caught in the excitement of the crowd, could bite or cause collisions. Chickens, geese, and even pigs brought from nearby farms might stray into lanes, scattering goods and adding to the chaos. Townsfolk learned quickly that awareness of animals was as important as awareness of people, that every step required attention, and that the unexpected could come from any direction. Amid these dangers, the townsfolk developed strategies of adaptation. Merchants reinforced stalls with ropes and poles, built higher shelves to protect goods, and trained assistants to watch for trouble. Buyers learned to move carefully, keeping valuables hidden, purses tied or sewn into clothing, and bags slung across shoulders to avoid opportunistic hands. Families marked meeting points in case of separation, or devised signals to call one another quickly. Children were instructed to stay near parents or trusted adults, and older siblings often shepherded younger ones through the crowd. These precautions became habits, integrated seamlessly into the flow of daily life, a silent acknowledgement that danger was ever present. Yet life in the market was resilient. The people found ways to coexist with threat, laughter mingling with caution. A merchant whose stall was burned might rebuild quickly, learning from mistakes. A peasant who had coins stolen might return the next market day with renewed vigilance. Stories of clever escapes, quick thinking, and even humor in adversity spread through the town, creating a shared culture of survival and ingenuity. Danger, in this sense, was not merely a hazard. It was a shaping force, molding the behaviors, relationships, and strategies of every market participant. Even routine activities carried the awareness of risk. Bargaining was not only about price but also about honesty and trust. Every handshake, every verbal agreement, was imbued with the possibility of deception. Food purchased had to be inspected carefully. Spoiled meat or moldy bread could lead to illness. Goods could be stolen, damaged, or lost in the crush of the crowd. Every decision, no matter how small, reflected the interplay of human cunning, environmental hazard, and communal vigilance. The town guards themselves became characters in the story of market life. They patrolled with measured authority, their eyes scanning for both human and natural threats. When a brawl broke out, they intervened with a mixture of caution and decisiveness, using staffs or chains but rarely swords to maintain order without escalating violence unnecessarily. They also enforced regulations on stall placement, fire safety, and animal control, quietly shaping the market into a space that could function amid chaos. Their presence was a constant negotiation of power, visible yet restrained, authoritative yet human. Disease, theft, fire, and accidents did not eliminate the joy, curiosity, and wonder that drew people to the market. Instead, they became part of its rhythm, an undercurrent of tension that made moments of delight, discovery, and connection all the more vivid. Children leapt between obstacles, chasing each other with reckless courage. Entertainers performed in spite of risk, their movements agile and precise. Pilgrims navigated the lanes with care, observing both the human drama and the natural rhythms of daily commerce. Each person learned to read cues from the crowd, to anticipate danger, and to act with both caution and spontaneity. By evening, the market's energy began to shift. Fires were extinguished, stalls packed away, and the crowd thinned. Town guards made their rounds, ensuring no lingering threats remained. Merchants counted coins, noting losses and gains. Families returned home, carrying the lessons of the day, vigilance, patience, and the knowledge that the market was a place of both life and risk, of possibility and peril. Even as darkness settled over cobblestones, the echoes of brawls, the smell of smoke and the whisper of disease lingered faintly in memory. In reflecting on the dangers of the medieval market, one realizes that life here was a constant negotiation between the desire for sustenance, commerce, and community, and the necessity of caution, preparation, and adaptation. Danger shaped the behaviors, decisions, and culture of townsfolk. It taught resilience, alertness, and an acute awareness of both people and environment. The market was simultaneously a site of human endeavor and human vulnerability, where the mundane and the extraordinary coexisted, and where every coin, every step, every breath carried with it the potential for surprise, pleasant or perilous. And so, the market remained a living organism, vibrant yet precarious, a stage where risk and reward intertwined, and where the medieval townsfolk learned, day by day, to live fully amid the dangers and disorders that were as natural a part of life as the smell of bread or the sound of bells. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the fading light turned cobblestones into muted shadows, the activity of the market square slowly shifted. The bustle of the day, with its calls of merchants, jostling crowds, and the occasional clash of brawls, began to settle. Yet even as the last wares were packed into barrels and tired animals returned to their pens, a different kind of energy stirred nearby. The taverns and alehouses of the town, tucked into narrow lanes, behind half-timbered houses, or spilling into small courtyards, began to hum with life. Here the townsfolk, merchants, and travelers alike found warmth, noise, and respite from the long day, trading the risk of the open square for the pleasures, and potential perils, of ale and company. The first sight of a tavern was often subtle. A thin wisp of smoke rose from a crooked chimney, curling toward the dusky sky. The warm glow of candlelight flickered through small windows, suggesting cheer and conversation inside. Wooden signs, swinging on iron brackets, creaked as they caught the evening breeze, depicting a tankard, a lion, or some other emblematic image of the inn's name. Sometimes a lute or a drum could be heard faintly before the door was even in view, promising entertainment alongside drink. For weary merchants, the sight was an invitation, a place to rest, exchange stories, and perhaps to forget the anxieties of the day. Inside, the taverns were a stark contrast to the cooling, open air of the market square. The scent of roasting meats, spilled ale, and a faint smoke from the hearth blended into a warm, heavy aroma that filled every corner. The walls were dark with age and soot, rough-hewn beams supporting a ceiling blackened by centuries of firelight. Wooden benches and tables were crowded with townsfolk leaning close to one another, voices raised in laughter or argument. The noise was a tapestry, clinking mugs, bursts of song, murmured negotiations for debts or future business, and the occasional clash of tankards meeting with too much force. Merchants often claimed a corner, setting their coin purses carefully beside a pint. Here they could recount the day's transactions, share stories of rare goods or clever trades, and sometimes boast of successes or commiserate over losses. Alehouses were democratic spaces in a way the market square could not be. Nobles rarely ventured inside, but in quieter taverns travelers, laborers, and townsfolk mingled in a shared experience of drink and respite. The hum of conversation provided both comfort and distraction, a gentle lull for those who had spent the day navigating dangers of the square. Music drifted from doorways and small stages, sometimes a single minstrel plucking a lute, other times a trio or quartet of pipers, fiddlers, or drummers providing a rhythmic pulse to the evening. Minstrels often performed on benches or small platforms, their faces illuminated by flickering candlelight, their fingers nimble across strings or reeds. Some sang of local heroes, others of distant lands or legendary tales, weaving stories into melody. Patrons listened, swaying or tapping feet, clapping in measured applause, or singing quietly under their breath. Music in these spaces had a double purpose: to entertain and to create a shared rhythm that bound the temporary community together. The tavern was also a place of ritual. Drinks were poured with care, mugs clinking in toasts to fortune, health, or companionship. Ale flowed freely, dark and frothy from barrels, the foam catching candlelight in creamy crescents. Spiced wines, honey mead, or imported liquors might be offered to those with deeper purses, each sip carrying a sense of indulgence, a momentary escape from the constraints of the day. Tavern keepers, seasoned and shrewd, knew the balance between generosity and caution, sliding mugs with practiced hands while keeping watch over potential disputes. Here, in this warm, lively space, human nature was on full display. Laughter and revelry mingled with temper, bargaining, and sometimes quiet negotiation of power or influence. Alehouses could also be places of storytelling. Tales of markets long past, clever trades, and narrow escapes from pickpockets or brawls were recounted with flourish. Travelers spoke of distant towns, odd customs, and news from the countryside. Listeners leaned in close, mugs in hand, drawn to the drama of voices, the cadence of speech, and the warmth of community. Even the quietest corners held subtle exchanges, a knowing glance between merchants who had crossed paths in the square, a whispered secret of a profitable deal, or advice on how to avoid trouble the following market day. Yet the alehouse was not free from danger. Arguments over coins or games of dice could flare into heated disputes. The clamor of the crowd could hide sharp words, stolen purses, or even a brawl that needed the intervention of a stern-voiced innkeeper. Patrons learned quickly to navigate these spaces, observing the moods of neighbors, sensing tension before it escalated, and choosing when to join a conversation or withdraw to a quieter table. Here, as in the market, awareness and intuition were essential, though tempered by the comfort of warmth and drink. The contrast between the open, bustling square and the enclosed, intimate space of the tavern was profound. Outside, bodies jostled among cobblestones, animals roamed, and the air carried the scents and sounds of trade and labor. Inside, the world was distilled, concentrated warmth, laughter, music, and the mingling of countless aromas. Patrons could rest their legs, unburden their minds, and partake in a collective, almost ritualized celebration of the day's end. Fires crackled in hearths, casting dancing shadows across walls, illuminating faces flushed from exertion or the heat of drink. Candlelight reflected on polished mugs and worn tables, creating a gentle glow that softened the edges of fatigue. Children were rarely seen in the more boisterous alehouses, though older youths might assist in serving drinks, delivering food, or entertaining with simple tricks learned from the streets. Their presence reminded adults of continuity, of the next generation that would someday navigate the market square, the alehouse, and the rhythms of town life. Stories were passed down orally, songs remembered, and lessons learned in these communal spaces, ensuring that culture, caution, and joy endured side by side. By nightfall, the tavern slowly emptied, leaving only a few lingering figures in shadowed corners. The warmth persisted, but the noise dimmed to occasional murmurs, the music faded, and the flickering lights seemed quieter. Merchants and townsfolk carried lessons, tales, and memories from the evening back to their homes, ready to rise with the next dawn and return to the square once more. The tavern and alehouse had offered more than drink. They were a space of reflection, of camaraderie, and of reprieve from the trials of everyday life. In the end, the medieval alehouse was a mirror of the town itself. It contained the warmth, the humor, the danger, and the unpredictability of life. It was a place where the human spirit could relax yet remain alert, where stories could flourish, and where the fleeting connections of a day's commerce could transform into enduring memories. Patrons left with mugs emptied, hearts warmed, and minds alight with the tales and music of their neighbors, carrying the echoes of the tavern into the quiet of the night, ready to awaken once again with the rising sun. As the sun sank fully beneath the horizon, the market square underwent its slow transformation. The last glimmers of dusk clung stubbornly to the tops of timbered houses, reflecting on the worn cobblestones that had carried the feet of merchants, peasants, and travelers all day. Stalls that once overflowed with goods were now being dismantled, boards lifted, barrels packed, and wares carefully stored away. Lanterns swung gently on posts, their flames flickering in the evening breeze, casting long, trembling shadows across the emptying streets. The square, which had roared with voices, the clatter of hooves, and the shouts of sellers, now softened into a quieter rhythm, punctuated by the occasional creak of a cart or the distant bark of a dog. The air carried a mixture of aromas, fainter than during the height of the day, yet rich with memory. Bits of roasted meat lingered above smoldering coals, and the sweet smell of honeyed cakes had faded but remained faintly near the baker's shuttered stall. The pungent odors of the tanneries and refuse heaps persisted, but were carried off slightly by the cool night air. The smell of smoke, both from hearth fires within homes and from the few lingering torches, mingled with the evening chill, creating a heady perfume of town life winding down. It was a scent that spoke of labor completed, of meals eaten, of a community settling into night. The creatures of the market, long accustomed to human presence, began to roam more freely. Dogs padded along the edges of the square, nosing through scraps of bread and meat discarded by careless patrons or overzealous merchants. Pigs rooted through piles of vegetable peelings and husks, their grunts and snorts punctuating the soft murmurs of those still lingering. Cats, sleek and silent, darted between barrels and crates, hunting smaller prey and occasionally curling up near warm hearths or piles of straw. Even the animals seemed to understand the rhythm of the day, the transition from the clamor of noon to the hush of night. By now most people had begun to retreat. Merchants had counted their coins, secured their valuables, and made arrangements for the next market day. Apprentices and laborers, exhausted from the long hours of hauling, measuring, and selling, returned to their quarters, often with the muted chatter of their families greeting them. Travelers who had arrived earlier in the day sought lodgings, passing through darkened alleys with only the faint glow of lanterns to guide them. And those who preferred the warmth of taverns lingered a while longer, spilling laughter and conversation into the streets, though even here the energy gradually ebbed. Torches, once bright and numerous, now burned low, casting a golden glow that stretched across cobblestones like liquid sunlight. Their flames illuminated patches of activity. A lone merchant finishing tallying accounts, a group of children chasing a wayward dog, or an elderly townsperson making a slow passage home with a basket of provisions. Shadows lengthened and merged, creating an interplay of light and dark that was both magical and slightly eerie. The play of firelight on timbered walls, the subtle creak of signs in the wind, the muted calls of night birds settling in the eaves, all combined to transform the square into a liminal space, neither fully day nor fully night, but a quiet bridge between them. The remaining street criers, once so insistent and loud, had long since given up their calls. Some still lingered, softly announcing news of distant towns, lost items, or special orders for the following day. But even their voices, once commanding and urgent, were now subdued by the calm that settled over the square. In corners where merchants had haggled over prices only hours before, the evidence of trade remained in quiet remnants. Coins glinting in the torchlight, overturned baskets, a stray cloak left behind, or the faint imprint of a sandal in the dust. Each small detail told the story of a day concluded, a microcosm of the life, energy, and human presence that had pulsed through these streets. The transition from day to night was also marked by sound. The cacophony of haggling, the braying of animals, and the shouts of children gave way to quieter tones. The rustling of wind through leaves, the distant tolling of a church bell, and the occasional laughter or song from those still in taverns. Dogs barked sporadically, their calls echoing between empty buildings, and the soft clatter of shutters being secured punctuated the air. Even the silence had texture, carrying within it the memory of the day's liveliness. One could almost hear the echoes of footsteps, conversations, and music lingering invisibly among the stones. In the midst of this gentle winding down, small groups of people continued their own nocturnal routines. Couples walked home hand in hand, whispering beneath the low-hanging lanterns. Town guards made their rounds, vigilant even as most of the population retired. Messengers moved quickly and quietly, delivering letters or parcels to households not yet settled. And in quiet courtyards or doorways, friends lingered briefly to share a final word, a last smile before parting into the darkened lanes. These movements, subtle and fleeting, spoke to the rhythms of the town, the habits shaped over generations to respect the delicate balance between activity and rest. Meanwhile, the taverns, which had drawn so many earlier, gradually emptied. The clamor of laughter, song, and argument diminished, replaced by the quiet hiss of embers in the hearth. Mugs were drained, benches scraped against floors one last time, and innkeepers began the labor of tidying before their own rest. For a moment, a single voice might carry through the hall, a song, a story, a remark, but even that faded into the steady calm that was settling over the town. Patrons returned home with the lingering warmth of drink and conversation, carrying it with them like a comforting shadow as they passed beneath lantern-lit streets. As the final torches sputtered and guttered low, the square grew still. Leftover scraps of the day fed the animals, while silent shadows crept across empty stalls. The patterns of commerce, chatter, and music were now memory incarnate, etched into every stone, timber, and corner. Above, stars began to appear in the night sky, small points of distant light over rooftops and chimneys. The wind stirred lightly through alleys, carrying with it scents of wood smoke, damp earth, and distant hearth fires. The town exhaled, settling into night, its pulse slowed yet still present in the quiet, invisible rhythms of its people. Nightfall at the medieval market was not just an end, it was a pause, a moment of reflection. The square, once vibrant and full of life, now existed in a softer register, reminding the town's inhabitants that every day, no matter how busy or chaotic, concluded with rest, with calm, and with the promise of dawn. Footsteps became whispers, voices faded, and the market slept under the watch of the moon, a silent guardian over empty streets and lingering memories. Even in silence, life continued. The few remaining night wanderers, animals scavenging quietly, and the watchful guards ensured that the square never truly slept. It rested, only to awaken with renewed energy, scents, and sounds when the sun would rise again, ready to repeat the cycle of life, labor, and human interaction. Nightfall was a necessary counterpoint to the day's chaos, a gentle descent into calm, providing space for dreams, reflection, and the slow passage of time. And so, the medieval market, once alive with movement and clamor, became a place of quiet memory. Stalls stood empty, torches burned low, and the last remnants of day lingered in the cool night air. The world beyond the square was dark, but not dangerous, peaceful, rhythmic, and gentle. Life had paused, if only for a moment, leaving the town to rest, to breathe, and to prepare for the inevitable return of morning light. The market has fallen silent now. The last of the torches gutter low, their smoke rising into the night air in faint spirals. Cobblestones that only hours ago rang with footsteps and cartwheels now lie cool and empty, touched only by the breeze that sighs through narrow lanes. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes, the remembered hum of voices, the laughter of children, the clatter of merchants counting their coins. The sounds are gone, but they linger in memory, as if the stones themselves hold the day within them. For the people of the town, the market square is more than a place of trade. It is the beating heart of their world. Every morning it awakens with the rhythm of life, animals driven in from the countryside, peasants carrying baskets heavy with produce, merchants unfurling cloth and stacking bread, voices rising in greeting and in bargain. Here news from distant lands first arrives. Here gossip grows and stories spread like wildfire. Here friendships are forged, rivalries born, and daily survival secured. The market is a living mirror of the town itself. Its energy shifts with the seasons. In spring, stalls overflow with greenery, herbs, young vegetables, fragrant bundles of flowers. In summer, the air is thick with the scent of fruit, honey, and spice. In autumn, baskets brim with grain, nuts, and the spoils of harvest. And in winter, the market huddles close around fires, stalls selling salted meat, dried fish, woolen cloaks, and the things needed to weather the cold months. The square changes, but its heartbeat never stops. Yet within this heart there is both life and danger. The market is a place of joy and abundance, but also of risk. Pickpockets slip through the crowd, nimble fingers seeking purses loosened by distraction. Fights erupt when bargains sour or when drink stirs hot tempers. Fires, once sparked, spread quickly among the timbered stalls, and illness travels easily through the press of bodies. For townsfolk, these dangers are simply part of the rhythm, acknowledged, endured, and woven into the very fabric of market life. Still, for all its hazards, the market is a place of community. It is where one sees neighbors, where a friendly nod or shared loaf reminds each person that they belong. It is where the town spirit becomes visible, not behind closed doors but in the open air, where poor and rich alike must tread the same stones. The market square is a common ground, a place where lives intersect, however briefly, in the great tapestry of daily survival. And now, as night deepens, the memory of that tapestry begins to soften. The day, with all its noise and bustle, has faded into stillness. The square lies empty but not dead. Its silence is a gentle silence, full of promise rather than loss. The torches burn down to embers. Dogs curl into corners, their bellies full from scraps. Cats slip into barns and storerooms, guardians of grain against the bite of mice. The watchmen pace their steady rounds, their lanterns swinging, guiding them through shadowed streets. Above it all, the night sky stretches wide, its stars reflected faintly in the windows of shuttered houses. Somewhere in the tall bell tower, the great clock strikes the hour. Its deep tones roll across the town like a lullaby, reminding all who listen that another day has passed safely, and rest has come at last. For those who lie down in their beds, the memory of the market drifts like a dream. A mother recalls the warm loaf she bought for her family. A child falls asleep thinking of the brightly colored ribbons a merchant sold near the fountain. A farmer feels the ache in his arms from carrying grain, soothed by the knowledge that he has coin enough for tomorrow. And a weary traveler, having found a room at the inn, drifts into slumber remembering the mingled scents of spice and smoke, of food and fire, that marked his journey through the square. The market is not only the heart of the town and waking life. It follows its people even into their rest. Dreams carry its echoes, the call of a seller, the laughter of children, the music of minstrels playing beneath the arches. These sounds do not vanish with the closing of stalls. They live on, carried in the minds of all who walk the square. And so, as the town sleeps, the market sleeps with it. Together they share in this nightly rhythm, this necessary pause before dawn. In the quiet, the air seems softer, the stones warmer, the sky closer. Time stretches gently, unhurried. The day's worries fade, replaced by calm. The square holds its people in memory just as the people hold the square. Each belongs to the other, tied by the endless cycle of gathering and dispersing, of labor and rest, of noise and silence. Tomorrow the torches will be lit again. The gates will open and carts will roll over the cobblestones once more. Merchants will shout, coins will clink, and the square will awaken vibrant and alive. But tonight there is peace. Tonight there is rest. Tonight, the market waits quietly, breathing with the town, watching over it until the first light of dawn. And as you listen, perhaps you too can feel that peace settling around you. The noise of the day, the clamor of voices and the rush of movement has passed. What remains is calm, soft and steady. Imagine the square, empty beneath the stars, its stalls resting, its stones cooling, its people sleeping. Feel the stillness, the safety, the gentle passage into silence. Let the echoes fade now. Let the day's brightness dim into memory. The market square, once so full, is quiet, and so may you be. Close your eyes and rest as the town itself rests. For like the market, you too have worked, have spoken, have listened. And now, like the square, you are ready to fall into the quiet of night. The torches flicker, the embers glow, and the stars will slowly above. The market sleeps. The town sleeps. And you too may drift into sleep, carried on the gentle rhythm of this ancient place. Safe, calm, and quiet,